Curiosity will need to live with us and has lived with me at least throughout my entire career. Marketing, it's a domain that keeps changing, and often we don't have control over the change. So the more you're interested in learning about how different algorithms and channels are evolving, the better you're going to be at your job, I think. And you can never really stop learning.
I'm Nicole MacLean, and this is Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. This show is your digital partner for filtering the trends and focusing on the content that matters most, creating connection that drives results. Let's cut through the marketing chaos together.
My name's Cristina Huré. I'm the Senior Content Marketing Manager at ContactMonkey, and we're an internal comms B2B SaaS solution, and we basically help internal communicators better engage and measure employee engagement. So all of what I do deals with content from blog posts to video marketing to LinkedIn content, sales enablement. So I touch a little bit of everything under the content marketing umbrella, and it's my favorite part because I love variety.
So tell me, how did you get into marketing and kind of find yourself in the position you are now?
I started working as a journalist in the Netherlands. I did my master's in international comms.
What took you to the Netherlands?
So I found a joint program, and my dream was to live or experience Europe longer term. So it was a joint program between the Netherlands and Italy. And as I was studying, I ended up working for an energy magazine. It's literally called NRG. And I would cover energy and adjacent field stories, and then became the editor-in-chief after a period of time, and kind of found that my undergrad is in poli-sci. I quickly realized I don't want to be in politics. I want to be in the creative space. So
There's
from there,
cons to the politics side.
Oh yeah, for sure. But from there, I came home, started working in PR for agencies. I was working on a number of different clients in 2 different agencies, then went on to in-house PR. And after that, I found myself in content marketing. During the pandemic, actually, I pivoted from travel in the middle of the pandemic to a digital mental health company called MyBeacon. So that's how I kind of kickstarted this transition between PR and content. And now I'm here at ContactMonkey.
Yeah. What would you say are the similarities and the biggest differences from an editorial content lens versus a content marketing lens?
When you're thinking about stories to pitch media, so you kind of have your journalistic hat on, and you have to always monitor what are the different stories that media are covering, and how do you insert brands into the existing conversation? While on the content marketing side, you can kind of create your own conversations. You don't have to find conversations where you might make sense to insert the brand, obviously. So I find that you have a lot more control over the narrative. And even beyond just the messaging and storytelling side, I went from a world where there was no metrics. You couldn't measure success or performance unless you had a good relationship with a journalist, for example, and they were going to send you follow-up data. But now I have all the data that I need. I can track performance. I can see user behavior. I can actually use the data to inform a strategy rather than a bit more guesswork is involved when you're working with earned media. So I think those are the main differences.
Yeah, the data piece is so interesting. I like the way you framed that, you control the narrative, you can see what's working, what's not. You almost get probably more immediate feedback on if the narrative's resonating with the audience and then can adjust to that, versus with earned, it is a little more guesswork, or it can also be so dependent on cultural trends, so much more outside of your control.
Totally. And I mean, it's easier to say that you can build trust a lot more successfully in the earned media space, because you're basically earning that coverage, right? So if a journalist doesn't believe in your brand or in your mission or the story you have to tell, they'll reject you, which happens quite a bit.
Yep. You gotta have a thick skin in the earned side.
Yeah, but once you know how their brains work and what makes a story and what they're interested in, you have to get pretty close, I guess, to the journalists themselves, like getting to know them and what they're covering that at that particular time. It ends up working from a relationship perspective.
So it's interesting right now because I feel like every webinar I go to or anything I read on AI search and how that's changing the game, it is that reputation management, earned media is going to play a bigger role, if not a more, link building has always been a touchy topic in SEO and how much it actually impacts with domain authority. And now with the LLMs, if you have a really good earned brand reputation strategy, that could actually be your fastest path to showing up in some of these. It almost feels like the marketers, because we've had so many marketers on the show that have a journalistic background, which is great, but it almost feels like the PR background is now going to actually take a larger piece of just your traditional content. I'm curious just if you've noticed that, or if you're kind of thinking about how to use that skill set and bring that in to be more part of your strategy, knowing kind of where that's shifting.
Yeah, I've had a few aha moments lately where I find it keeps coming up. I'm like, oh, this is actually digital PR coming back like full circle. So even though my title has changed and my focus areas have changed, this similar principles are reemerging in terms of how do you garner the placements in other media sources, like even Reddit.
Yeah.
LLMs are scanning Reddit first, right? Or it's part of the sources that the tools are crawling. So you have to kind of shift your mentality from, we have all this control over the owned media channels, but you're not going to get visibility unless we earn some traction too. So very different world we're in right now.
Can you share maybe one or two of those aha moments that you've seen?
Well, just studying like the algorithms, the changes in the algorithms and exactly how the machine works. I make that distinction a lot now, human versus the machine. Yeah. It's kind of funny. I never thought I would have to, but here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah, so I find the more positive reviews you have on Google, for example, the higher you rank, or the more features you actually garner in the GAI overviews. Reddit, if the sentiment is positive, I find that the brand will appear much more frequently in GAI. So those are just some basic examples, I would say, but it's become pretty obvious that all the channels matter if you want visibility and impressions now, because that's how we're starting to look at measurement.
In theory, that's how SEO always should have worked. Of course, there are some dedicated things you can do to optimize, hence search engine optimization. But it's always been, I think, the strongest brands, the best holistic strategy. Maybe 7 times out of 10 are the ones that win. Of course, there are certain industries that you can kind of hack your way into. But now it's just kind of becoming clearer and clearer that that's what will win in the market. Mm-hmm. When you said trends come back, I feel like right now for any millennial, we're seeing, 90s trends come back in fashion and things. Yeah. We're kind of, like you said, a digital PR strategy. That's definitely what I'm hearing more and more of. And it's not just link building. Whether you're pro link building or anti-link building, if you're looking at someone who's selling you a digital PR, I would highly recommend that you're pushing to make sure it's not just a glorified link building package.
Yeah.
Because it's way harder to do. Like what you said, you have to really understand the narrative that already exists and then figure out how you organically and naturally work into that. And so much, and this is why I think people haven't liked link building, is because it's just this is 10% relevant to what we do. So yeah, let's get a link and send that signal back.
Yeah, for sure. I've never been totally pro link building. I find that a lot of the times I'll get pitches, my inbox is full of pitches, but I can never find the relationship. Why are they sending me this opportunity when it's clear that our traffic and our ICPs are very different? So that's another aha moment, I would say, because when PR people pitch journalists of stories that are not part of their beat, they must be why are you sending me this? Right. So, yeah.
Well, and it goes to, I have a background in partnerships, and it's always something I think either gets too narrowly defined. It's like, oh, well, you have a partnership, so that means it's referral or, resell model. Like that's a partnership program. But really it's so much broader. I think it's just finding and building relationships with folks who aren't necessarily clients, but just share a similar ICP, have a similar mentality, and then finding ways to work with them. That could be a digital PR, that could be webinars, podcasts. I mean, it could be a lot of things that isn't just a direct resell. And I think especially in a down economy, that type of pure relationship is what often gets overlooked.
For sure. And synergies, I'm happy about the fact that relationships seem to be more front and center now, and there's more sentiment across the board. I think even non-marketers are starting to realize we don't want transactions, we want relationships. So
oh, I love that. All right, I feel like that needs to go on a marketing pillow, cross stitch of it's not about the transactions, about the relationship.
Yeah, people first. Isn't that why we're in the business?
Well, you would think, but sometimes I think that gets overlooked and that almost goes back to, I love data. I would say most marketers now are way more data heavy than they ever were previously, but it can be a little too easy to hide behind the data and get lost in, is this an MQL or an SQL and forget that it's really a human who's experiencing your brand, your content, and is that content actually helping to reestablish the relationship along the way?
Yeah, and add value for sure.
So that's a great transition into what role does content play for you at ContactMonkey right now?
So it's being used strategically across the full funnel. So like I said, it's about blogs for SEO. Sales enablement is now under content, which means we need to help with key messaging around the product and how do we stand out against our competitors. And whenever there's a new feature being launched, how do you market that? So
you're a product marketer now.
Yeah, it's new, I guess. I never had product marketing strictly under my umbrella, but it's more prominent. I would say that I spend more time now understanding how to market the product rather than writing SEO posts, but things change every month, kind of. I'm just keeping up with the changing times.
Absolutely. How sales enablement is an interesting one because I think in a thriving content engine, having sales feedback, customer feedback, having your head of content or the person working closest to the content really understand how the market is relating to the product just makes the content better, even if it's an SEO piece or a sales collateral. But most content marketers don't have a background in product knowledge. It's a different skill set. So how have you adapted that? Or do you think that this type of messaging should belong with content? Because at the end of the day, you are the kind of that veil of consistency before it goes into the market.
I do, because I often find product managers and the people who are building the product, they don't translate what the product means for the user in the best terms. And sometimes it can be a little too technical, and we forget that more often than not, people who don't work in tech, for example, might not have the technical knowledge and the technical understanding. So really, when you market a product, I think you have to kind of dumb it down a little bit. Talk to me in the most basic terms. Grade 8 level language. That's what I kind of use as a guiding principle. And if the content marketer is already close to the customer, because, the content, by adding value, you're actually solving challenges, you have to really understand how the audience thinks. And the closer you get to the audience, I think the better you are at messaging what the product actually offers and its value props. So I think for the most part, it should live under content, product marketing in general, or there's just close collaboration between content and product marketing. And that, I don't think that can be overlooked.
Well, and what I've seen too is, bless our product managers and even sometimes product marketers, depending on where they sit, I think if it's a product marketer that sits in marketing versus a product marketer that sits in product, this could look different. But it's like what you said, is making sure it's simple language that they can understand, but also putting it in their shoes of like, okay, well, what are the 18 things that a user of ContactMonkey is potentially doing in a day? And ContactMonkey is one of the things they need to go do. How do you talk about release notes or a new feature, or if it's a prospect, how this would add to their day from their lens? And very often marketing is one of the few departments that like eats and breathes that every day, versus it could be the same information, but just told in an entirely different perspective.
What's interesting about my current role is that I actually have communication experience. I've never strictly done internal communications, but similar principles apply when you're speaking to internal versus external audiences. So I'm kind of like, I understand what it's like to be in the user's shoes. I understand what it's like to use different email tools as a marketer, and it really helps to have like that real life experience, because otherwise you can get a bit vague in the way you explain things, and I find that it's not as effective. But yeah, hopefully I'm doing well as a product marketer. So far, so good.
Yeah, absolutely. The internal comms piece is interesting because I think at small organizations, it does tend to sometimes fall under marketing to do that too. Because like what you said, there's a lot of overlap. We are the communicators. We do a lot of external communication. So when there's internal stuff, I've either been tapped or I've had colleagues that are tapped to say, okay, well, can you roll out this new thing? What are some of the maybe best practices you've seen on an internal side that would maybe be different from external, if there are any? Or is it just really similar? Is it really like in the kind of the best standard practices stand?
I think there's more that I think is missing in terms of how internal communications operates, that they should kind of borrow from the marketing playbook. Because if you look at, like, I thought back in all of my roles, and I remembered what the emails were like when receiving from HR, and it was kind of like long paragraph text just deployed directly from Outlook. There's no visuals. You just have to read 300 plus words, if not more. But when you send an email to an external audience member, there's design involved, and how do you craft the messaging? Where do you put the CTA? How do you make sure that the reader actually takes action? So it's different because I don't think internal comms is there yet, but that's really why I exist, is to help them kind of get better at their jobs by teaching them different marketing principles and ideally increasing engagement the same way we would to external audiences, but now you're just dealing with internal folks, and it should be easier, and there's untapped opportunities because employees they belong like within an organization. You can speak to them, you can walk up to their desk, you can ask them what their communication preferences are or send a survey, whereas external audiences are harder to access until you build trust and relationships with them before you engage them. So
Deadlines looming and you're juggling a million projects? Maybe you've tried outsourcing to an agency before, but how can you be sure that they're going to deliver on your specific goals on time and on budget? Well, look no further than Clutch, the #1 leading marketplace for B2B service providers. Clutch streamlines your search, helping you kick off projects faster so you can focus on what you do best. On Clutch, you can select from over 2,000 unique services and specialties to quickly narrow in on a comprehensive list of the agencies best for your project. Then filter down to a short list of qualified providers through filters, or use Clutch's project brief technology to match you to the best fits. From there, just compare the providers by reading in-depth verified client reviews to learn more about the work that these agencies have done for businesses like yours, so you can make a confident hiring decision. Get matched to the best agencies for your business and request quotes at clutch.co/contentmatters. You'll be one step closer to having those projects off your never-ending to-do list, so you can shift focus back to the big picture. That's clutch.co/contentmatters. Shifting gears a little, what would you say is a current challenge or recent problem that you're working through or working to overcome?
overall in content, it has been a challenging year just to figure out what comes next. How do we pivot? How do we adapt? How do we change our strategy? And it's kind of similar to what we've been talking about, like the relationship first and value first kind of marketing strategy and approach is coming up more and more. We're doing direct mailers. That's new. I haven't really heard previously digital companies, so tech forward companies doing direct mailers, although I think it's a really good idea because when you have your inbox flooded with all hundreds of emails, how do you really cut through the noise? And we're now kind of thinking about marketing in contrarian terms. So our focus is now to basically get attention in ways that people are not used to seeing it.
I used to do a lot of direct mail pre-2020, and yeah, it was a really effective channel. How have you overcome are you working from home versus working in an office and knowing where to send the direct mail to?
Yeah, so we have an events team that manages all the logistics, but the relationships are pretty much owned by sales. And we first reach out to them and let them know that we'd love to send them a package or whatever that might be as part of AVM campaigns. And they'll confirm their address that way, or we already know from their signatures or databases where we can send. But I mean, sometimes it doesn't end up landing with the right person, and that's always a risk that you take. But
yeah, it's been the hardest thing for me to justify post 2020 is just knowing where are people and where can it land? Because sometimes when everyone was in an office, it's like, okay, well, hopefully this gets to someone, or someone will put it in the kitchen and say, oh, this was clever, or it'll make its way around. But in the hybrid or remote work, I feel like it's a harder thing, but I definitely feel like it was incredibly effective. And there's something about the tactile, or I had a boss that would say lumpy mail, just something that didn't, that perfectly, like it makes you're intrigued and you're curious to at least open it and see what's in there.
Yeah, very different for sure. And every time there's a tangible, I think it improves the overall experience. Like you can play with their senses. Maybe you want to send them something they can smell and touch, feel, unravel, whatever it might be. So I find people's retention is a lot better when they actually have a full experience, like in real life rather than just digital.
Can you give an example of a campaign you recently run?
Yeah, so we did like an X marks the spot kind of treasure map campaign. And inside it was like a full-on comms kit with different little gifts that are related to each of the customer accounts. And there was a treasure map. And in order to access your treasure, you had to scan the QR code, which would connect them with our sales reps. And the sales rep would give them a code. And that's how they would unlock their treasure. So it also gave sales an opportunity to reconnect with their prospect and, rebuild that relationship.
That's amazing. That's really fun. I love that.
Yeah, kudos to our events team. That was pretty much driven by them with content support, but it was very heavy on the logistics front, but it actually worked quite well. So success.
Yes. So I used to work in employee engagement measurement, like surveys, probably like 5.5 years ago now. But I remember doing one with like a fortune cookie theme. Ooh. So we did custom fortune cookies, and we had some like proprietary data. And so the fortunes weren't really fortunes, but it was like interesting data about engagement, and kind of going back to like, don't leave your employee engagement to luck or something like that, get data so you can actually make informed decisions. But it's a fun space to play in for sure.
Yeah, I love it. The more creative we can get, the more fun it is, right?
Exactly. So I feel like now this is a consistent question I have to ask in just the world that we are. But so 2-part question. One, what is the internal discussions look like around AI, specifically the use of AI? How, like, are you being told to embrace it and figure out how to make it more efficient? And then part 2, which I can share, but is, how are you doing that? Are there any, really great use cases you have that you can share?
Yeah, so the company overall is definitely pro AI, and it's encouraged. We're often encouraged to start exploring or advance our skills in with all kinds of AI tools. How I've been finding it's helping me do my job a lot faster. We have integrations built in between Gong and our AI tools that essentially summarize the transcripts and can offer me like the top customer pain points, where they're getting stuck, competitor mentions. So I actually access content intelligence through these AI integrations with Gong. And that I think has helped me make the content smarter. And even we just finished revamping our landing pages. And the angles we used were all related to these top mentioned pain points. If I had to go
That's
through
a
Gong
dream for marketers. Yeah.
I know. Because before this integration, I was thinking, like, how do I extract all of this data? There's thousands of conversations in Gong, right? You can do like keyword searches, but I hadn't found a way yet to take all of the data and summarize it in like top 5. And it did like a sentiment analysis, captured all the frequency of each of the pain point mentions, and that's how it came up with, here are the top problems that your customers are dealing with. Now solve them through content.
Right. And is that just like a Zapier integration with tools, or were you able to actually connect like OpenAI or, whatever tool you're using directly on top of Gong?
I think it was through API. I didn't set up the integration directly. Someone on our technical team did, but I'm pretty sure it was API. I can follow up on that if you really want to know.
Yeah, I still have so much to learn, obviously, but I'm always trying to figure out, like, how do you actually, like Slack recently, maybe by the time this comes out or someone's listening to it, maybe not that recently, but has, like their own Slack AI, which I'm sure is either their own or sometimes it's built on top of something. And now it can summarize Slack threads or Slack conversations. HubSpot, I know, has recently kind of said, hey, you can integrate with OpenAI and we'll try to, do some summarizations. So I'm always trying to figure out, like, where is it more like pre-built APIs? Where is it where some people have total workflows with Zapier, which can make it work really well? Just because I think that's maybe the next challenge I'm hearing in the market is, okay, people are getting more comfortable with the prompts or using some of these tools and knowing what it's good at and what it's not. But now it's more of the structure and kind of like the engineering side of, okay, well, if this could do this and I can input this here, but how does that all come together is now not just prompt engineering, but like software engineering again.
Yeah, the connectivity of platforms and
Thank you. That's a better way of saying it.
I mean, I don't have all this in-depth technical knowledge, but yeah, it's definitely a priority to explore. There's just too many fragmented systems, and without this connectivity, you don't really capitalize on what AI can actually do for you until you find the connections.
Exactly. I think that's what I suspect maybe the back half of 2025 is going to, I feel like we're going to see a lot of people moving from here's the prompt I'm using to like, okay, here's the workflow and the tools I used where, and here's how I set up those integrations. That's just what I think we're going to start seeing come next.
Yeah. And like we have an AI task force, for example, and there's different brains, let's say, on the task force. So I think many companies are going to start to establish these committees or task force, and they're responsible for exploring, like, what do we do next?
Yeah, we just had a team meeting, and we're a fairly small company, probably in comparison. So we don't have a task force quite yet, but trying to be very intentional about getting people to share how they're using it, even if it's something small to them, that it could unlock an idea for someone on a different team.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to really encourage sharing. And that's maybe our first step at a task force. But I think that would be to any listener is, especially if you're a leader at your company, I do think leadership has to create the structure for the sharing, for being purposeful. It's one thing to say, okay, well, we support, like, we're open to AI, try to use it to find efficiency. And then it's another thing to actually create intentional structure or intentional time in the midst of everything to figure out how to best use it.
Yeah, you're right. And then the other kind of consideration is, how do we draw the line between building this thing way beyond our own capabilities to the point where we're no longer needed?
Yeah.
There's still the fear around, will AI replace our jobs? So it was a question that came up in one of our last town halls, like what parts of the product or the business is remaining untapped deliberately in order to save that for the humans.
Yeah.
Yeah, but right now the priority is to first explore and identify its use cases. So I don't think we're there yet as a company and overall like a society to identify where AI is not going to interfere.
No, it's the right question. I know when we were first prepping too, it was the day OpenAI launched agentic, if that's how you say it, agentic
Yeah.
workflows. And we were kind of talking about, okay, this is the next, evolution of it. And I think, I don't know, it was probably one of the scarier updates for me.
I know.
It just wants it to do so much for you. But there's still so much that is left. Like, it's just not there yet. And it's hard to really get a sense on how quickly. So, like, this is such a dumb example. But we were talking in a team meeting and somehow zodiac signs came up. And we were like, someone was like, oh, yeah, I'm a Gemini. Like, everyone hates us. And so then I was like, well, let's ask ChatGPT. What's the least liked zodiac sign? And, of course, it's like, well, no, there's not one that's the worst or whatever. But there are, according to whatever. And I think Gemini was on the list. But it was like Gemini, something, and Leo. And then I was like, okay, well, what are the most liked zodiac signs? And it was, I honestly can't remember, it was like 2, and then it was Leo. And so Leo showed up in both answers as both the most disliked and the most liked. And I said, okay, thanks, ChatGPT. Clearly, we're not there yet in its ability to actually summarize and like pick up that nuance. I know that's such a kind of silly and very simplistic example, but it was one of those of like, okay, well, if you just really keep asking or digging a little deeper, I don't know exactly how great sometimes the answers are.
I'm happy you actually brought that up. I don't think it's a stupid like example at all, because isn't liking emotional?
Yeah,
So
that's a good point.
I know there's all this conversation about AI now acquiring emotional intelligence, but I'm not really sold.
Yeah, exactly.
So perfect example. If you can't tell me what's liked and disliked, then I'm going to assume you don't have emotional intelligence, and I'd like to keep it that way.
I agree. And I think, going back to what you said too, of like, where are you intentionally deciding to leave space for human in your product and in your delivery? I'm curious if 6 months from now, 12 months from now, we will all find the same thing. Like, will everyone say, oh, like ideation? I have heard as many people say, ChatGPT is great for ideation. You should totally use it for ideation. And then you as the human take that idea and go implement on it. And I've equally heard, oh, you should never use, ChatGPT for ideation. It can't create net new ideas. You're going to get ideas that everyone comes up with. Like, that's really where the magic of human lies. The human should be creating the ideas. Even as society, I don't know that we all agree where humans should really stay and where artificial intelligence should step in. And so I think it'll be interesting to see if companies implement it in the same way. And odds are probably not. And it'll be interesting because the ones who I think get it right will be the ones that sustain, and the ones that don't are probably what will fail. And of course the ones who don't use AI at all or don't figure out how to, but it's not just going to be, oh, I implemented AI, I'm going to sustain this. It's going to be how you implement it, and do you implement it in the right ways?
Yeah, and I think it totally depends on the kind of people that work for the different companies. Because back to your point, if you ask a creative person
where to put them.
Yeah, like I don't use it personally to generate ideas that I completely run with. I'll use it to spark ideas. But if it's basically trained in digesting information that's already available. Then whatever you ask it to generate is an idea that somewhere exists, right? So you kind of risk implementing different ideas that aren't necessarily novel. And if your company and organization values novelty and uniqueness, then that's probably not the right way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I know we're kind of coming up on time, but I always like to ask anything or kind of any advice that you leave marketers with right now.
Yeah, stay curious. And I think that curiosity will need to live with us and has lived with me at least throughout my entire career. Marketing, it's a domain that keeps changing. And often we don't have control over the change. So the more you're like interested in learning about how different algorithms and channels are evolving, the better you're going to be at your job, I think. And you can never really stop learning. I don't know. I love to say that I'm a lifelong learner, and I believe in that. So best advice is to keep going, keep learning, keep exploring, and learn as you go, pivot, and don't be afraid of risks.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. Okay, that's a great place to end. Thanks for listening to this episode of Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. If you like the show, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. Otherwise, you can find all the resources you need to stay connected with us in the show notes. Till next time.